Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a four-game WNBA slate here. I'm gonna get into some picks here before I get started, though. Can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? This slate starts at 7 p.m. and features 8 teams out of the 12 WNBA teams, so we have a lot of players to choose from today. But we have some good ones at each position, and then I have a few value plays. There's not a ton of value today, unfortunately, but there's a few that are under $7,000, so I will mention those. But let's go ahead and get into our forwards here. And we're going to start with Nafisa Collier. She's had 6 games over 42 fantasy points on the season, and she has had no games under 25 fantasy points. The only two under 30 fantasy points, giving her expensive but a solid floor. Wilson from Las Vegas, a little bit safer, but she's a good contrarian play as she is pretty max price here. As for Wilson for Las Vegas, she is a core play today, or a very good play today, rather. Not a core play, but very close to being one. For Las Vegas, she's had 4 games in the last 5 over 45 fantasy points and is a double-double machine. She's only had 1 game under 29 fantasy points all season long and just 2 under 35. She's had 8 games over 40 fantasy points was what she needs to pay off today, and she's definitely capable of doing that. Brittany Griner is also in play for Phoenix. She's here because she scores 30 fantasy points in all but 2 games this season. She's also over 36 fantasy points about half the season, but she's viable, but not a must-play today, but she does draw some utility as a good-priced player. Then we'll look at Cheyenne Parker for Atlanta. Now, she's been under 21 fantasy points in 3 of the last 5 games, but she's also been over 32 in 4 of the last 7. She plays around 22 to 27 minutes a game, and she's had 8 games on the season over 33 fantasy points, so she draws some good upside here. Then we'll look at Elena Smith for Chicago. She's only had 4 games as a starter under 24 fantasy points. The worst game as a starter was versus Atlanta, though, who she plays today. But she's had 6 games over 32 fantasy points, is what she needs today to pay off on this particular slate. And then Nalisa Smith for Indiana. She's been under 22 fantasy points in 2 games all season long. She has 4 games over 31 fantasy points in the last 5, and she's been over 31 fantasy points in 9 of 17 games this year. Her worst game of the season was versus her opponent on June 17th, but she does have double-double potential today. And then Tiara McGowan for Dallas is a good play today. She started last 6 games. She's been over 25 in 4 of those, and she's been over 29 in 3. She's also been under 20 twice, but she scored 30 fantasy points last time versus Las Vegas and has double-double potential. And then Tiana Hawkins, who is a core play for me today. She's recently been starting due to other injuries, and she started 4 straight games here. And in those 4 games, she started 4 games. In 3 of those, she's been over. Let me start that over. Tiana Hawkins, she's started 4 games recently due to injuries to other players, and in those starts, she's had 3 games over 23 fantasy points and 2 over 25. So she's got some nice upside today, and she draws a pretty good price as well for Washington. Excuse me. Moving into our guards, we're going to start with excuse me, Ugan Bolorwi. Sorry for butchering your name. I don't know how to say it. But anyway, for Dallas, she's only had 2 games under 27 fantasy points all season long, and she scored 33 fantasy points last game versus Las Vegas. She has a pretty safe floor and has 8 games over 35 fantasy points on the year, which is right around her average and what she needs today. As for Chelsea Gray, she's only been under 25 fantasy points 4 games all season long, and she does have a lower ceiling than Jackie Young on her team, but she's been over 35 fantasy points in 6 of her 17 games this season, so she definitely has some utility here. Jackie Young is a core play for me today. Sorry, I couldn't find her. And she's only had 3 games under 25 fantasy points all season. She has a very good floor, and she draws a great matchup versus a team that she scored 43 fantasy points against last time out. She's also had 9 games over 34 fantasy points, was what she needs to pay off today. Then we'll look at Howard for Atlanta. Now, she's in a tough matchup, but she's been over 33 fantasy points in 5 of the last 7 games, and she's only been under 25 fantasy points all season 3 times. She had 30 fantasy points versus Chicago last time out, and she's been over 33 fantasy points in 6 of 18 games this season. She's really improved recently. Alicia Gray for Atlanta is also in play. She's only had 2 games over 33 fantasy points in the last 6, but she's also only been under 25 fantasy points 3 times this season. She had 18 fantasy points last time versus Chicago, but she's been over the 33 fantasy points in 6 games this year. And then Diamond Miller for Minnesota is an interesting play today. Somewhat hard to roster as she had a really bad game last game. But she's had 3 games over the last 4 over 30 fantasy points, and then she had, of course, her bad game. She feels riskier as her shooting has been up and down, but she has the talent to do well. All the games that she's played, she's been over 17 fantasy points, but she does need to get around 26 to 28 fantasy points to really pay off here. And in my 3 value plays today, we're going to start with Wheeler for Indiana. Now, she's high risk today, but she's been better than 17 fantasy points in all but 2 games, and she's averaging 20 to 27 minutes this season, and she's been over 23 fantasy points 5 times this year, which gives her some nice utility. Excuse me, I can't stop coughing. Then we'll look at Cunningham for Phoenix. She's back from injury and starts most of the games. She's got a good ceiling as someone who can score in bunches, but does little else. She's definitely scoring dependent, but she's had 7 games over 22 fantasy points, and that's what she needs to pay off today. But she has had 3 games under 15, so that is the risk. And then we'll look at Robinson for Atlanta. Now, she's the cheapest play here that I've selected. She started the last 4 games, and her minutes are right around 20 minutes a game. In 3 of those games, she was over 17 fantasy points, but she's been close to the 18 points that she needs in 5 of her last 7 games, so she definitely has some good utility here. With that said, guys, it seems like a pretty good slate for WNBA, so I think it's a good slate to try out. If you haven't played WNBA before, this is not a bad slate, so I do recommend checking it out and trying it out. Throw a lineup in the quarter GPP and see what you can do. With that said, WNBA players tend to be a lot more inconsistent than like NBA guys, so there is some increased risk there, but it's a lot more like college basketball. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day, guys.